appreciate your patience with me setting these things up so we can put them on Facebook and then on over to YouTube. Have several people who try to keep up with these series, and we want to give them every opportunity. I heard from my best friend, and I use the term loosely. We've been best friends for 41 years, something like that. And he watched about 15 minutes of last Sunday night's and then sent me a note to tell me how much he enjoyed it. And I thought, well, if you enjoyed it so much, why didn't you watch the last 15 minutes? But anyway, his name is Kelly McCoy, and he has been here, by the way. He interviewed, I don't know what year it would have been, maybe around the year 2000, somewhere in there. Y'all were looking for a preacher, and Kelly came and spent the night and interviewed here, and y'all didn't hire him, which makes me have one up on him anyway. So anytime I'm ahead of Kelly, life is just the way it ought to be. All right, we're going to continue our study in Genesis. The book of Genesis is named for its place in Scripture. Genesis is the book of beginnings. And it's not just in the beginning God created. There's all kinds of beginnings that come across in Genesis, and we'll try to notice them as we go. But for the most part, the reason there are so many things that are new, so many things that are Genesis in Genesis, is because it was originally delivered to a group of former slaves and refugees. And these people did not know who they were. In their mind and in their entire lives, they had just been slaves. And in fact, in the last year or so of their slavery, it had gotten worse and worse and worse. This fellow Moses shows up and says that on behalf of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, on behalf of I have come to lead you out and give you the promise that he made to your forefather Abraham. And then all kinds of problems started. Pharaoh made their life even worse, if that was imaginable, through the whole time that God was punishing Pharaoh, defeating Egypt, and getting them ready to move out of Egypt and head toward the Promised Land. So lots of things have changed in their world in a very, very rapid pace. And they're just getting to know this God. They didn't know him very well while they were in Egypt, if at all. And so they get out into the desert, and they began to get to know what this God is expecting from them. And so we get to Genesis. And as God begins to explain to these people who he is and what he's done to bring them to himself, he starts at the very beginning. So again, even Moses, although perhaps he had some understanding of who God is, he didn't know a great deal more than the rest of them when he started. So he's still got a learning curve going on, and then he's trying to drag the rest of them along with him to understand. So when you start Genesis, you don't get any introduction. You don't get a read this first section. It just jumps right in. In the beginning, God. Right? It doesn't explain who this God is. It doesn't explain where he came from. It doesn't ask any questions about his substance or his being or where he might be. Just in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And from there, he begins to introduce himself in a lot of different ways. We get to know God best in Scripture, not necessarily from who God says he is, although he gives us some of those. But we get to know God by the things that he does. Particularly in Genesis, his trustworthiness. He makes promises to human beings, and then he keeps the promises. As a God, any kind of God, you would figure that he has the power to decide at some point, well, I've changed my mind, I'm not going to keep that promise anymore. But not our God, not this God. This God makes promises and then keeps the promises that he's made. He identifies himself as one who does things for human beings, and the things that he does for them are above and beyond. When you look at Adam and Eve in the garden is way beyond anything you could have designed yourself. As a place to live, it was the absolute perfect place to be. but he gives them rules to keep. They break the rules, and he keeps his word. Everything he says is going to happen, whether it's good or whether it's bad, it all comes to pass. So he's a God that they can trust. He's a God that they can come to understand. All right? I want us to just read through the days of creation, and all of you are probably familiar with them, but we'll read down through chapter 1, and then notice some things that God was letting these Israelites know about himself in this first chapter. Some things that they needed to learn and that they would have learned from this part of the text. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was formless and empty, and darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw that the light was good. He separated the light from the darkness, and God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. There was evening, there was morning, the first day. And God said, "Let there be an expanse between the waters to separate water from water." So God made the expanse, separated the water under the expanse from the water above it, and it was so. And God called the expanse sky. There was evening and there was morning, the second day. And God said, "Let the water under the sky be gathered to one place, and let dry ground appear." And it was so. And God called the dry ground land, and the gathered waters he called seas. And God saw that it was good. Then God said, "Let the land produce vegetation, seed-bearing plants and trees on the land, that bear fruit with seed in it according to their various kinds." And it was so. The land produced vegetation, plants bearing seed according to their kinds, trees bearing fruit with seed in it according to their kinds. God saw that it was good. There was evening and there was morning, the third day. God said, "Let there be lights in the expanse of the sky to separate the day from the night. Let them serve as signs to mark the seasons, and days, and years. Let them be lights in the expanse of the sky to give light on the earth." And it was so. God made two great lights, the greater light to govern the day, the lesser light to govern the night. He also made the stars. God set them in the expanse of the sky to give light on the earth, to govern the day, to govern the night, and to separate light from darkness. God saw that it was good. There was evening, there was morning, the fourth day. And God said, "Let the waters teem with living creatures. Let the birds fly above the earth across the expanse of the sky." So God created the great creatures of the sea, and every living, moving thing with which the water teems according to their kinds, and every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. God blessed them and said, "Be fruitful and increase in number, fill the water in the seas, and let the birds increase on the earth." And there was evening and there was morning, the fifth day. Then God said, "Let the land produce living creatures according to their kinds, livestock, creatures that move along the ground, and wild animals, each according to its kind." And it was so. God made the wild animals according to their kinds, and livestock according to their kinds, all the creatures that move along the ground according to their kinds. And God saw that it was good. Then God said, "Let us make man in our image, in our likeness. Let them rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air, over the livestock, over the earth, over all the creatures that move along the ground." So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. God blessed them and said to them, "Be fruitful and increase in number. Fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air, and over every living creature that moves on the ground." Then God said, "I give you every seed-bearing plant on the face of the whole earth, and every tree that has fruit with seed in it. They will be yours for food. To all the beasts of the earth and the birds of the air, to all the creatures that move on the ground, everything that has the breath of life in it, I give every green tree for food." And it was so. And God saw all the things that he had made, and it was very good. There was evening, there was morning, the sixth day. So the heavens and the earth were completed in all their vast array. But by the seventh day, God had finished the work he had been doing. So on the seventh day he rested from all of his work. And God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it he rested from all the work of creating that he had done. All right, so quickly, just a few things that if you are an Israelite in the desert. You're at the foot of Mount Sinai, and you're being given the story of your history for the first time. Some of the things that you are getting from this, number one, you're getting that God is the one who created everything. Right? There's nothing left off the list, is there? If you see it, if it's a plant or an animal or a light in the sky, then all of that came from the same source. When you were living in Egypt, they had a god for just about everything. Right? There were the gods of the sea and the gods of the Nile River and the gods of the plants and the gods of the birds. There was a god for every occasion. Lots of pagan cultures have done that. When you get over to the Greeks and the Romans, there were just gods everywhere. If you go across to India, the Hindu people, there's a god. They just have a plethora of gods. I've known several wonderful young Hindi people and have had the opportunity to visit with them. And they'll tell you about the god that their particular family worships and what that god is set apart to do. Well, if you're an Israelite in the desert and you've just come up out of Egypt with all kinds of different gods, here's the thing you're learning. Just one. Right? He made everything. He's in charge of everything. He is an all-powerful, all-knowing God. You don't need any other God. And since He's on your side, who else do you need? And who are you going to be afraid of? Right? So as a group of people who are at risk, they're living in a place they've never lived. They're being fed by manna, quail. They're having to search for water from time to time. And this God is providing all those things. So as long as we've got this God, we're okay. That's one of the first things that they learned. One of the second things that they learned is that there are 7 days in a week, not 10. Right? When they were in Egypt, the Egyptian calendar was 3 sets of 10 for a month. Right? So they were slightly off of the Gregorian calendar, but not too far off of what we know to be a year. They would make up when the moon cycles would kind of get out of kilter with the way they were calculating things. They would rearrange their thinking a little bit. But these Israelites learned very quickly that there are 7 days in a week. Right? The evening and the morning were the first day. Hebrews don't count time like we count time. They counted time from 6 o'clock in the evening to 6 o'clock in the evening. So when we see the evening and the morning were a day, that's what they mean. They started in the evening and they ended the next evening. So Sabbath would be from 6 o'clock on Friday evening to 6 o'clock on Saturday evening, as we would call it. Right? So there's a different way of counting time, and added to that is the idea that you don't work every day. Right? As slaves, there was no such thing as a day off. And if you started thinking about leaving Egypt, you found out that not only did you not get a day off, but now you had to go get your own straw for making the bricks. Right? You couldn't mess with Pharaoh and your life get better. But once you get out into the desert, you find out that God created the entire planet, everything that's on it, all of the cosmos and everything that's in it in 6 days. And having done so, He rested. And the rest of Scripture is built to show us how we can enter into His rest. That's what it's all about. When you get to the book of Hebrews, in the New Testament, the Hebrew writer does a wonderful job of introducing us to the idea that God wanted mankind to have this, not comfort, but security, this place of security, that we could enter into that rest that He's entered into. So He offers it to the Israelites. He gets them to the land of Canaan. They refuse to go in. They're too scared. And so the Hebrew writer picks up on that, and he says, here's the generation that God wanted to bring into His rest, and they wouldn't accept it. So there's still a rest waiting for the people of God. Right? So if you read through Hebrews, you'll see that theme keep popping up, that God wanted mankind to have this kind of relationship with Him that was a place of safety, a place of security. And so we start counting time in sevens and taking 1 day off per week. And by the way, when you read the 10 Commandments, it's not optional. Right? the Sabbath day rest was not something that would, that would be nice if you take the Sabbath day off. It was a direct command. They found a fella not too long after the Ten Commandments were given who had gone out and was gathering sticks for his fire. And they find him out there wandering around doing work on the Sabbath. And they come to Moses and they said, Moses, we're not sure what to do with this guy, but we caught him violating the Sabbath regulation, which is number 4 of the 10. I think it's number 4. What do we do? Moses went to God and God said, stone him to death. So that's pretty straightforward, right? You're going to keep my command to rest one day a week. Why was it hard for them to rest one day a week? They'd never done that before. They had become very self-secured, self-sufficient. They knew that they were always supposed to be working. Does that sound familiar? Any of us have that problem? That we can't possibly stop what we're doing because the world will quit spinning and everything will be out of kilter if we're not always doing something. God created the entire cosmos in 6 days. And by the way, I'm a literalist. I believe it was 6 24-hour periods of time. When he got finished, he rested. The ancient Hebrew scribes noticed that there's no day 8. Did you notice that? We don't go from God rested on the Sabbath to God started back up doing something on the next day. And they read into that the idea that God always remained at rest. He finished the job. It was perfect. He didn't need anything else. So he didn't have to go back to creation. He didn't have to redo, undo. Everything was the way that it was supposed to be when God got finished on day 6. If you want to think about it, read what Jesus said as he was headed toward the cross. In John 17, he says, Father, I have finished the work that you gave me to do. While he's on the cross, one of the 7 things that he says from the cross is, it is finished. Right? I did my work. Right? So Jesus dies on the Sabbath day. He does what? He rests. He stays in the tomb. First day of the week, he rises from the dead. He doesn't ever, ever, ever have to be crucified again. He never has to do that work. That work's done. So God's work of creation in Genesis 1 gets the world and all the cosmos exactly where it needs to be. He doesn't have to do anything else. Jesus' work on the cross gets the work of salvation exactly where it needs to be. He doesn't have to do anything else. Everything has been accomplished that needs to be accomplished. Just a couple of more things, and I'll just leave the message with you. Did you notice that there's a little bit of a pattern to the way that the story is told? Right? God speaks. Right? God said, "Let there be," and then something happens, and it was. And then that kind of an interesting thing. It's in most of the days, but not in all the days. God does quality control, right? He takes a look to make sure that everything he just created was the way he wanted it to be. Did he mess up on anything? Well, no, of course not. But it's interesting in Genesis, the account tells us that he looked at everything and saw that it was good. He gets to day 6, he creates the animals, he creates mankind in his own image, and he looks at the entirety of everything, and we get one extra word. He saw that it was very good. God was well satisfied with the things that he had created and given to mankind. So as we go through Genesis, we'll see lots of beginnings, lots of things that God puts in place for these people that he loves so much, for these people that he's created in his own image. And as we go through, we'll see all the different things that he does to make sure that they have the things that he wants them to have. So, Lord willing, we will continue that thought next week and get into talking a little bit about Adam and Eve, where things begin to go a little bit a kilter. If there's anything we could do to encourage you, we'd love to, as we sing.